Meanwhile, let's get to the Guardians, of course. We'll talk about the trade deadline because we're already seeing teams starting to get active. All of a sudden, the last 15, 16 hours, we've seen, I think, 3 or 4 trades happen. We'll get to those. And in fact, the Guardians haven't done anything yet. But the Guardians' second half of the season gets off to a slow start, kind of like it ended. They lose yesterday 3-0. The bats have continued to be cold. Remember, they scored 7 the first game after the break, although they scored 6 of those late in the game. And since then, they've scored 0, 1, 2, 5, 2, and 0. They lost their first homestand of the year, split 4 with the Tigers. But for all the talk about the pitching, and yeah, they need pitching, the bats have just been ice cold since coming back from the break, and they weren't great the week or two before the break.
They've played 20 games this month, and in only 9 of them have they scored 3 runs or more. 11 times. That's more than half the time they're scoring 0, 1, or 2, and it's not going to get it done. And actually, credit to the rotation, which has, it's still needs help, but it has not been the issue the last few weeks. And so, the numbers are kind of jarring. I think we said this last time, but it's easy to feel like when your team is in a funk, the sky is falling and it's the end of the world, and this is just who they are. And I think it's also, they weren't as good as they were when they were 51-26 and they were having scorching hot numbers with runners in scoring position. But it's hard for them to win when in July, David Fry slugging percentage 213, Jose Ramirez on base percentage 298, Naylor slugging percentage 353, even Stephen Kwan on base percentage 298. Like, those 4 guys are all sputtering at the same time. And so Schneeman's been dreadful lately, and Angel Martinez is cooled off some. Will Brennan is 0 for 17 since returning from the injured list. Like, those guys who are trying to find their footing as big leaguers, they're going to go through ups and downs. What hurts is when you have all 4 of your all-star hitters scuffling at the same time. It's really hard to overcome that. So that's not going to last forever.
Right.
But you think it underscores the fact that as much as the rotation needs help, and there's no doubt about that, just because they don't have the quantity. They don't have there's just no one lurking below. At least offensively, you can say, well, I'd like to see what Manzardo can do again. I'd like to see what Juan Brito could add. But I don't think it's just the pitching. I think they also need an established hitter, and they've got a few days to acquire one.
The good news, even though they've lost 15 of 25 and have played average at best baseball going on a month, is that they still remain 4.5 games, 4 in the loss column over the Twins, 5.5 games and 6 in the loss column over Kansas City, with 60 games to go in the season. So
they're still tied for the best record in the American League. It seems hard to fathom.
It's right. They're not playing well right now. That doesn't make them a bad team. They're not. And ultimately, it's funny. We talked about this on Monday, the fact that baseball is an imperfect sport, and there's always somebody going to struggle. The best players will have bad stretches. Unfortunately, their best players, at least offensively, are all struggling at the same time. Whereas early in the season, it was like, Jose wasn't great in April. It wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great. And then he got hot. Naylor cooled off, and Fry was kind of hot the whole time. And Kwan was hot, and then Kwan gets hurt, and Naylor picks it up again. But now, for the last few weeks, they've all struggled. Kwan, it's been a little longer than Fry, it's been a little longer than the other guys. But overall, all 4 have struggled. We thought Kwan had the batting title in the bag. He certainly does not now, the way Bobby Witt has played. But it is not time to panic, but it is time for the team, the organization, the front office to get serious. And they need to show that they're trying to win. I think that's what we need to find out. Because if the Guardians sit on their hands or only do minor things between now and the deadline Tuesday afternoon, they're showing that the organization is not committed to winning if that's what they do.
Yeah.
And that would be disappointing.
I have a few things on that. Number one, we've talked about this ad nauseum. There's no reason not to be aggressive. You have a team that deserves to have your belief in it. I think the fan base has responded well to this team, and you can build on that momentum, and it means something. It's not just about this year, but if you get fans captivated and you prove to them and you prove to the players in that clubhouse that, hey, we want to arm you guys with a little more talent to try to push us over the top, everyone's going to buy in. It's going to help you going into next year too. If you don't go for it, why are fans going to buy tickets for next year?
That's right.
Just to hope that once again they find themselves in position. And are you going to capitalize at next year's deadline? Are you going to do something this winter? I mean, I understand it can be very difficult this time of year to execute exactly what you need. And we keep pointing to 2016 when they got Andrew Miller and they got Brandon Guyer and they almost got Jonathan Lucroy. And it seemed like a perfect storm. And that might be an unfair standard to use as a reference point. However, the Mariners are in a free fall. You think things are bad in Cleveland and that the Guardians have been struggling and that they've really struggled offensively. The Mariners had a huge lead in the West. The Astros were left for dead, and now the Mariners are staring up at them in the division, and they know they need more than anyone hitters. And what did they do last night? Randy Arozarena is probably checking into your hotel right now, Bull. And he's a flawed player, but it just shows they were aggressive. They knew what they needed and they went and addressed that. I think it is just as obvious. We've been talking about Cleveland needing to trade for a starting pitcher since like late April. All right. So there's no excuse. You have to be like the American League. The fact that you've gone through this really rough patch it wasn't just, a bad week. It's been a bad month. And you're still tied for the best record in the American League. That just shows you how open it is, that the opportunity is there.
Yeah.
So I think there would be disappointment in the clubhouse if nothing happened. I think it's difficult. I know the Guardians were starting to reach out to teams about a month ago, just trying to figure out the market with the intent of being buyers. Like that's never been a question. They've always been on the hunt to add talent. And I would just wonder if they don't get what they want or they make a minor move or two, what happened, why it didn't happen, and what you can do to make that work. I think a big thing is two things can be true at once. One, I think they need to make trades and they need to be aggressive. They need to win this deadline. And two, it is still imperative. Like the things that Chris Antonetti and Mike Chernoff have said about them needing internal performances to improve or to maintain is true.
Yes.
Like Gavin Williams is critical. He's probably more important than any pitcher that they're going to add at the deadline. They need him right. They need him to be able to take the ball in game 2 of a playoff series, and they feel like they have the advantage. You can't. I know he really only made one mistake on Thursday, but that's a bad mistake. Javi Baez should not be taking anybody deep. He left a slider down the middle, right? And how the Tigers felt confident, I'm sure, going into the series opener with Skubal against Carrasco. Yep. Guardians should have been feeling that way in the series finale with Gavin Williams against a bullpen game, and they lost. So they need Gavin Williams. They need their all-stars to step up, and they need somebody to emerge. I don't know if it is Brennan, if it's someone at AAA, if Manzardo or Brito need to come up, if it's Tyler Freeman maybe getting back into an everyday role, Bo Naylor finally turning a corner. Like they need all of the above for this thing to work out. They need those external additions and they need internal improvements.